Welcome to the Resolve Algorithmic Thinking materials. This is a video to show you how to perform a local installation of a Jupyter Notebook environment. Now, you may be aware that there are two different versions of how you can run the algorithmic thinking notebooks. Let me quickly run you through that. There is the option to run them on a web server on Microsoft Azure, so a cloud-based version that requires no installation whatsoever, just getting an account on that cloud server. So that runs out of the box on any platform, in any web browser. And there's a separate video for how to use that. The alternative is you can do a local installation on your individual computer, and that is much faster and doesn't require an internet connection, but the installation can be a little bit involved, so you need to have some practice with using computers, doing installations and so on to follow this. This is really aimed at the IT administrators of the schools, or maybe teachers who are familiar with installations, and not at the end user. So if you're a student, you should probably normally not be seeing this unless you want to do it at home. Again, remember, if you have difficulties with the installation, there's always the cloud version for which there's a separate introductory video. Okay, so let's get going. So installation should be simple enough. What you're seeing here looks probably slightly different from your Windows. This is Windows 10, but it's running in an emulator on a Mac actually. So it will look slightly different on your desktop, but in principle it's the same. So we just need to install Anaconda, for which we open some web browser, for example Microsoft Edge, which is the default here, and then using that web browser we go to Anaconda's website, which is www.continuum.io, and we can go straight to downloads. And that will invite us to download the Anaconda distribution 5.0.0. That's perfectly fine, but we need to choose what we want it for. So we want it for Windows. Click there. Now we've got a choice of different Windows version, in particular Python 3.6 or 2.7. So we want Python 3.6 because 2.7 is not going to work with our notebooks. So click on download. You want the starter guide, the cheat sheet from Anaconda, enter your email address here in this field, but to make this a little bit faster I click on no thanks now, and we say run the install file. First has to be downloaded, so this may take a little bit. We're almost there. Here we go. So after the security scan for viruses, we've got everything. The installer is starting. Click next. Read the license agreement really carefully and click I agree if you agree, and we say either set it up for all users or set it up for just me, just a single user on the machine. I do this for just me now, but you as an admin will probably want to do that for all users. No need to modify the standard directory. And we leave the standard settings where they are. So Anaconda is a complex system, so this will probably take quite a while to install. and I pause the recording during that time and get back to you when the installation is almost finished. So the installation is almost finished now. On my emulator that took about 5 minutes roughly, so it should hopefully be faster for you on a normal desktop. Let's wait until it's really finished. Okay, so we're done. Setup completed successfully. And you may want or not want to get more information. I'll unclick that here to speed up everything a little bit. We've finished the installation and we're done with that. Let's close the browser here. So one thing remains to be done, and that's the installation of Plotly, and we do that directly from within the Resolve Algorithmic Thinking notebooks. So the first thing that we need to do is to get that distribution, and you can download that from the web, or you may get it from somewhere on a USB stick. So mine sits here in my OneDrive. There's the distribution, and if you look into that, there's a folder in there that's called Notebooks. I've already expanded that, so we've got that here. And there are all the notebook files in there. In particular, here's one that's called Start Here, and that's the one that we will use. So what we do now is we find Anaconda, and of course you find that in your Start menu here, alphabetically under A, Anaconda. From within Anaconda submenu, we launch a Jupyter Notebook server. Might take a second. And you see, this is the notebook server. The basic window looks very much like your File Explorer. You see all your files here, so we're interested in the ones that are on the OneDrive here, in the folder Notebooks, and in the notebook Start Here.ipynb. The important thing is use this one, do not use the one down here. The Start Here.py.python is automatically generated. That's not a notebook, it won't work. So we start this one, Start Here, ipynb. And this is a perfectly normal Jupyter notebook, just like all the other ones that the students will be using. And on top here are the installation instructions. You have just followed those up to this point. And now we need to execute this final step that's described here, and that will install Plotly for us. And the only thing that we need to do is to evaluate this code cell here, and that's done by placing the cursor in it and pressing Enter or Shift Return, depending on your keyboard. So we'll do that. That may take a second, because we may have to download stuff, and we'll get back to you with a bunch of messages. Now in my case here it says requirement already satisfied. This is because I already have a Plotly installation, and it doesn't overwrite that. It's just checked that I have a valid Plotly installation. If you don't have one, it will download Plotly and will install it and will confirm that it has been successfully installed. So now from here we could actually proceed to the lessons. But to make sure that everything is working perfectly, we do this just in the way that any normal user would do. So we quit everything and we start again from scratch. Of course not with the installation, we start again with the actual usage coming fresh to the system on which nothing is running. So let's quit that. We quit the Start Here notebook. We quit our notebook server and the associated shell. So we now have a clean system, so to speak. So we now come to our desktop like any normal user would do. What we do is the very first thing, just like before, we start up from the Start menu, Anaconda submenu, we start up a Jupyter Notebook server. Once that has started in our web browser, we find our notebooks and we head them on the OneDrive in the notebook section. We take the Start Here notebook, which contains a table of contents, start up that one. Of course, we don't need to go through the installation anymore, so we can directly proceed to the table of contents, and let's say we take the first lesson here. So we just click on that. And we've got lesson 1 on the screen. So normally the user will now start to read through that and execute the code cells as they come. We shall expedite that a little bit because we really only want to check that everything's working. So we evaluate these code cells up here. That's the preliminary configuration of the notebook. That's all working fine. Go a little bit further down to the first code block where something is actually happening, and this is here. We read in some external data, and that's worked fine because we can actually display it. You see the table here. And now we check that Plotly is working as well by doing our first visualization. And this has worked. You see the plot here, but you may also have noticed that it's taken a little bit. And this is an important point. It illustrates an important point because I'm on a very slow network right now. That's why it's taken a little bit, because essentially the data gets sent to a server and the plot gets sent back. The important thing is you need to be connected, otherwise you won't see a plot here. If you're not connected, this is going to stay blank. So that would be the first thing to check, whether you're connected or not. For these notebooks, you always need to be connected in the way that we've installed it. Now, there is a way to do the installation such that it can be used completely offline, but that's a far more involved installation, and there's a separate video for that. But at this point, we're confident to say everything has worked fine. The plot has shown up, the data got read in, so everything is ready to go for the end user. And a good point for the end user to start would probably be with the video how to use Jupyter Notebooks. So thank you very much and goodbye.